When Jabber raised his claws and revealed that his Jinki, Mankura, contained a potent neurotoxin in its right claw, instantly grabbing Rudo's attention. Without hesitation, Jabber stabbed himself with it, shocking Rudo and making him ask what the hell he was doing as Jabber writhed in agony. Jabber commented that it felt just as awful as before, an excruciating pain that made him feel like he was about to lose consciousness, while laughing like a lunatic. Then he called out to Rudo and said that if this blows off his consciousness and drives him to lash out violently, he wanted to know whether Rudo's Jinki would treat him as hostile. Rudo began to feel anxious as he watched Jabber slowly begin to black out, mumbling that he couldn't wait to find out the answer. Jabber finally passed out, and the area fell into a moment of silence, until suddenly his eyes flew open with a terrifying expression. He immediately began clawing and tearing the wall behind him as if it were made of paper. The debris from the wall Jabber clawed fell behind him as he let out an ominous, deranged laugh. Rudo stared in slight shock as it all happened, watching Jabber's body throb and sweat profusely. Jabber hunched down, both hands reaching the ground, then suddenly let out a deafening roar, his voice echoing throughout the area. A spit flew violently from his mouth due to the intensity. Jabber's body began to tremble as he continued, while Rudo started to feel uneasy about what was happening. Then, in a flash, Jabber charged forward and was suddenly right in front of Rudo. Just as Jabber's claws were about to touch his face, Rudo managed to duck and dodge the ferocious rush. Rudo was surprised that Jabber still had this kind of power in him, now seeming like a complete beast who had lost all sense of self. He turned to glance at Follow and Gris, realizing that if they couldn't move Gris and the others farther away, they'd be dragged into the fight. But to his shock, when he looked to his left, Jabber was already there, ready to strike again. Jabber shouted and lunged forward with a claw attack, which Rudo attempted to counter using the power of the amulet. However, it didn't work. Jabber's claws continued closing in, surprising Rudo. Thankfully, he was able to maneuver Jabber's arm and throw it over his shoulder. Jabber's face scraped against the ground as a result, while Rudo stared at his unmoving body. But it didn't take long before Jabber slowly stood back up and once again let out another monstrous scream. Rudo froze as he watched, commenting that Jabber really had knocked himself unconscious with his own poison. He added that the amulet only reacts to hostility, and noted how unexpected it was that Jabber figured that out so quickly. He thought to himself that Jabber clearly had a lot of experience and came in well prepared. He recalled what Jabber had said earlier about how stabbing himself still hurt just as badly as before, and how it had been so long since he felt this good getting beat up. Rudo remarked that those were the words of someone you'd call a super masochist. That reminded him of something, an old memory when his bully was kicking him repeatedly and asking if he was a super masochist for not fighting back, all while calling him a criminal. When Rudo got home that day, he had even asked Regdo what a super masochist meant, which left Regdo stunned and confused. Back in the present, Jabber's rampaging body charged at him once again. As he approached, Rudo thought to himself that he wasn't exactly sure how you were supposed to beat a super masochist. Jabber swiftly slashed at the surrounding pillars and leapt from one large chunk of debris to another, trying to disorient Rudo. When he reached a high enough piece, he pounced at Rudo, but thankfully, Rudo managed to slide away from where Jabber was about to land. However, while Rudo was still midair, Jabber came charging again with a series of claw strikes, forcing him to raise the limbs of the amulet to defend. In an instant, an opening appeared in Rudo's defense, and Jabber immediately took advantage of it. He tried to stab Rudo with his claws, and thinking he had no way out, Rudo simply braced himself to take the attack. But just then, a stick came flying between them and slammed Jabber into the ground with force. Jabber's body froze from the impact, and Rudo was stunned by what just happened. When he looked at the stick, he realized whose weapon, or Jinki, it was. Zanka, the one previously sedated by Jabber's poison, arrived on the scene. Though clearly struggling to walk, he irritably declared that he was seriously pissed off at the dreadlocked guy. He asked how Jabber could be playing around with a pipsqueak like Rudo when he hadn't even managed to defeat him yet. Fuming, he ordered Rudo to back off, because now he was going to teach Jabber a lesson himself. Rudo's eyes widened at Zanka's sudden arrival. Without wasting a moment, Rudo quickly moved away from in front of Jabber and rushed to the other side of the pillar where Zanka was leaning. He commented that it looked like Zanka was still alive, but his body clearly seemed far from okay. Zanka, irritated, asked what nonsense he was talking about and claimed he was feeling fit as a fiddle. He told him not to underestimate a regular person, calling Rudo a genius in a teasing tone. Zanka then added that it looked like Rudo had finally learned how to use a jinky properly. He said that the squid-looking thing behind Rudo looked really cool. Rudo got a little flustered upon hearing that, but explained that the amulet's ability no longer worked because Jabber had completely lost himself, and all he could do now was dodge his attacks. Zanka paused, thinking about what they could do, then asked if the squid thing only reacted to hostility. Rudo replied yes, and asked how he figured that out. Zanka explained that while he struggled to walk toward their battle, he had been analyzing the fight to figure out how he could join in, since, after all, he was the one in charge of training Rudo. He pointed out their situation. Rudo couldn't attack with his current weapon, and Zanka himself couldn't move well due to Jabber's neurotoxin. Not long after, he came up with a plan and called out to Rudo. He ordered Rudo to let him hit him, which confused and startled him. Zanka clarified that he just wanted to try something, and it would only take one hit, prompting Rudo to snap in frustration and ask what the hell he was talking about. Zanka said that although he couldn't move much, if he attacked Rudo, there was a chance Rudo's weapon would react and help him move. He added that his love stick had a longer reach than Rudo's fists, so he might be able to strike Jabber before Jabber's claws reached him. Rudo argued that if it didn't work, he'd be the one taking the hit. Zanka told him if that was the case, then he didn't need to worry about it anymore. Just then, Jabber's body twitched again and yanked the love stick out of himself. Zanka commented on how fast this guy was able to get up again, and soon enough, Jabber's body was poised to charge at them. They watched his movements carefully, and in a blink, Jabber slashed the nearby pillar, but luckily, both Rudo and Zanka managed to dodge it. They moved behind Jabber, and Zanka quickly retrieved his jinky. He warned Rudo to never let those claws touch him, not even a scratch, because that alone was enough to immobilize someone for a long time. He expressed his deep annoyance toward those claws, saying they pissed him off to no end. Mockingly, Rudo echoed Zanka's own words from earlier about not needing to worry, which made Zanka sigh in frustration and snap that he really should just hit him, and he immediately tried to do just that. As Zanka's love stick was about to hit Rudo, the amulet reacted once again and moved his body out of the way. This gave Zanka a clean shot to land a solid strike on Jabber. Zanka was surprised as he felt how the amulet worked in real time. Jabber spat blood from the hit, while Rudo glared at him intensely. Jabber's body collapsed again, and the two stared down at him. Furious, Rudo pointed out that Zanka had genuinely tried to hit him with hostile intent. Zanka immediately denied it, insisting he didn't expect it to actually work. He claimed it was just a test. He was only trying something. Then, as he moved behind Rudo, he said he might have just found a plan that would finally work against Jabber. He told Rudo to start by launching him in with a strike from behind. He swung his jinky again, while Jabber's body began charging once more at Rudo. Annoyed by the idea, Rudo still hurled Zanka forward using the amulet, launching him swiftly to Jabber's side. Upon arrival, Zanka slammed his weapon into the dreadlocked beast, smashing him into the floor. Zanka commented how interesting it was that the amulet could also extend flight distance, and pointed out that Rudo might have gone a little too rough with it. Charging in, Rudo snapped back that he'd show him what rough really looked like. Zanka raised his love stick once more and ominously told Rudo he should try being a bit more gentle, calling him an idiot. As Jabber was about to get up, lifting his head, he saw Zanka flying toward him midair, already prepared to strike. Both of them had intense expressions on their faces, and as they locked eyes, Jabber suddenly snapped back to his original self. He muttered to himself that the bad guys finally arrived. And then, with overwhelming force, Zanka slammed Jabber's face into the ground using his jinky, burying his head and shattering the floor beneath them. Finally, the jinky that pierces evil. Jabber was now defeated, while Zanka's legs slowly gave out until he collapsed onto the ground and lay flat. He was relieved that the battle was finally over, saying he couldn't move anymore because it had been so tough. Meanwhile, Rudo grew alarmed when he heard a sound. The amulet that Gris had used was slowly cracking and breaking apart. He couldn't believe it was happening and dropped to his knees, reaching out to pick it up. Zanka noticed it too, and Rudo couldn't accept what he was seeing. He didn't know how it happened, saying he hadn't done anything. He desperately wanted to know how he could save it. Zanka wondered whether those weaponized objects had a time limit or if there was some other cause. Rudo blamed himself and began trembling. Concerned, Zanka crawled toward him, sensing something strange in his behavior. Moments later, Rudo collapsed to the floor, eyes wide open, and began to convulse. Zanka couldn't believe what he was seeing. As he approached, he noticed a wound on Rudo's back. He wondered when he had been struck by Jabber's claw. Behind him, the vandal's hand suddenly moved again, and he rose, alarmed at the sound, and turned to look. Jabber had used his claw to stab himself, which allowed him to stand once more. Despite the severe damage to his face, he came back to life with a new surge of energy. Jabber said they had played too much. He began walking. Even though he didn't fully understand what had happened, he felt he did pretty well in his unconscious state. Zanka was stunned that he was still able to get up and asked how that was possible despite the injuries they inflicted on him. Jabber knelt down and explained that it was thanks to his left claw. Zanka was shocked and wondered if it had healing abilities. Jabber laughed and denied it, saying Zanka was wrong. It couldn't heal anything. The truth was, if he used the left claw with the right amount of toxin, it could make the pain go away, but if he overused it, it could be dangerous. That was why he only used it on people he truly intended to kill. He admitted that he didn't expect to be beaten so badly. That was thanks to both Zanka and Rudo. He was already very used to the so-called right poison that he gave Zanka, that it only lasts about 10 minutes for him. But in Zanka's case, he estimated it would wear off in 30 minutes. So, he said, he would prick him again. After doing so, he turned his back and began to leave. If he failed to achieve his original goal, he said, they would surely be mad at him again. He then walked over to Rudo, who was collapsed on the ground, and thanked him for waiting. He invited Rudo to leave with him. Jabber picked him up and walked off, bidding farewell to Zanka, whom he mockingly called bad guy. See you later, he said. Jabber walked away, and Zanka could do nothing. The poison kept him completely paralyzed. As Jabber continued on, he suddenly realized that he had forgotten about his two comrades, but he shrugged it off and left them behind, thinking someone would pick them up anyway. Jabber was already approaching the hole in the ceiling where Rudo had fallen earlier. He leapt upward to get out. Meanwhile, although Rudo was paralyzed, he was still conscious. He simply couldn't move his body at all. Once again, he blamed himself for what happened to Gris and to all of their companions. Jabber continued to ascend while carrying him, but was surprised to realize he had emerged outside. He had expected they were still inside a building. Upon stepping out, he grew uneasy while we see that someone else was there. It was Rio. She said that she had finally found him. Jabber was surprised when he saw her, and suddenly, an umbrella appeared and struck him hard, sending him flying and causing him to drop Rudo. The impact was so powerful that Jabber was thrown far into the distance. The symbol of the janitors was shown, and one of them even commented on how bold it was for someone like him to cause trouble here. Engine's umbrella was shown, and it turned out he wasn't alone. Several other janitors were present too. Engine said it looked like they were going to need to do a proper cleanup. All of them bore the janitor's symbol on their clothes, and each one was ready to fight. As Engine examined the hole, he noted that it seemed to go deep beneath the building. Because it extended so far underground, their chokers couldn't be used to communicate. He considered that this must have been part of the Vandal's strategy, setting a trap in a location where it would be difficult to call for help. It was such a typical move for someone evil. While still above ground, he placed a hand on one of the supporters' shoulders and expressed his appreciation. If not for people like them who managed to find a phone near the town to call for help, they might never have known what was happening. The supporter replied that Gris and the others were still down there. She grew concerned, wondering if they had been taken out. However, Engine reassured her, saying they weren't that weak. He ordered her to take the others and assist them, and without a word, she followed. Meanwhile, Jabber remained standing, the wall behind him clearly damaged from his earlier impact. He smirked at the sight of so many strong-looking men staring him down. Being this beaten up and looked at like trash, it actually aroused him, he admitted. They didn't expect him to say that. Engine turned to Rudo and asked if that was the guy he had been fighting this whole time. He called him a crazy guy. Rudo struggled to respond. Rio, however, remarked that he actually looked better than she expected, which relieved her. One of the janitors questioned what she was even talking about, since Rudo clearly looked like he was struggling to breathe. Another janitor was furious and said they would never forgive Jabber. He couldn't believe he had done that to one of their own. But they were silenced, as Injin said he had plenty of questions for Jabber, and that he should not expect it to be easy to get back to the hole after causing trouble for the janitors. Jabber knew this was a bad situation. He had to run and escape, or he'd lose his freedom. He needed to come up with a plan. Still, he took a step forward and said he had orders too. He had a mission to retrieve the Sky Person. He activated his Jinki again and admitted that while he had an overwhelming desire to flee, he no longer cared if he won, lost, or died. He couldn't go back without completing his mission. He positioned himself to attack, fully fired up for battle. But before he could act, someone suddenly grabbed him from behind, a move that even Injin didn't see coming. Jabber was caught off guard, and the newcomer said it was time. They had to return. He recognized the voice. It was Katoni. Jabber insisted she let him go, saying he wasn't ready to return yet. He knows that he needed to take the Sky Person with him. But Katoni replied that his time was up. She added that those henchmen are in the way, so it's better for them to head back. Injin began to wonder where that girl had come from. None of them had noticed her presence at all. Jabber, on the other hand, couldn't accept what she was saying. He couldn't just leave without completing his mission. He told her to stop interfering and that he wasn't done playing yet. But Katoni simply whispered that their boss was smiling from ear to ear. Jabber froze and calmed down the moment he heard that. It seemed that just hearing that brought him some joy, and he muttered a gleeful oops. So, it was that time after all. He apologized to the group and said he had to leave. Too bad, he added. Once Katoni released him, everyone could now see where she had come from. Something Rio hadn't expected at all, a manhole embedded into the wall. Before leaving, Jabber turned to Rudo and said he never thought he'd enjoy playing with him this much, even though he was a Sky Person. But knowing Rudo was still unconscious from the poison, he asked the others to pass the message on. Just then, Rudo stirred and let out a sound of frustration. He suddenly shouted, calling Jabber a shitty bastard. Struggling to stand, he declared that they weren't finished yet. Jabber was surprised that Rudo was still conscious after being poisoned. But Rudo insisted, until Jabber paid for what he did to Gris, their fight wasn't over. Jabber only laughed and said he liked Rudo's fighting spirit. Until next time they meet, he said. As he looked down at Rudo, Jabber suddenly noticed his hand. He recognized the design on it and was surprised that Rudo had the same series. Everyone was confused about what he meant. Jabber seemed impressed by the coincidence and remarked that their boss would definitely be pleased when he reported it. Katoni went into the manhole first, and Jabber followed behind. He said that while he didn't have a choice this time, he would definitely be back for Rudo. So, Rudo better be ready next time. He advised him to treasure that well, because next time, they'd be playing again. With that, he disappeared inside, and the manhole suddenly shut tight.